Hey gang, mic's working, that's good. So, there's the title, and there's someone who's not me. So, who am I? I'm Mike Loss. You might know me from B-Sides Canberra or Whack-On, or sometime I yelled at you on Twitter. In any case, I'm from Perth. I work as a pen tester at Asterisk Information Security. Also, I have a really bad cold today. So if you're speaking after me and you have this mic, don't worry, I bought some alcohol wipes to wipe it down with. So, why is he shouting at us this time? I'm here to tell you a bunch of easy ways to make pen testers sad, because notionally, if you can make us sad, you will probably have a similar effect on some real attackers as well. It's mostly going to be about Windows and AD stuff, partly because that's what I'm into, and partly because just about every shop runs on those things. If you work for some cool shop where none of this applies, congratulations, I'm sorry for wasting your time. There's a bunch of links and script snippets and stuff in the talk, but don't panic about writing them down or taking photos. The slides will be online. So, I was going to start with some jokes about bad ways to make testers sad, like hamstringing us with unrealistic rules of engagement, but it took up too much time and it wasn't very useful. So, the good ways. The good ways are the ways that take us down a peg. We're kind of a smug bunch, and frankly, we've become altogether too used to the idea that on network pen tests, we're going to win every time. This is because, unfortunately, through some perfect storm of bad default configs or a lack of security training available for sysadmin types or needlessly Byzantine change management processes or minuscule budgets, all networks kind of end up being the same, or at least all the bad ones. As seen in this delightful and extremely modern diagram, they generally have a bunch of Windows desktops, a bunch of Windows servers, some switches and routers, some weird Linux appliancey things around the edges, and a bunch of terrible printers. The network will mostly be flat, and all of the above will be joined to the same terrible AD domain, which was born in about 2002, then managed by the following people. An extremely crusty admin who was entirely new to AD because AD was entirely new. He was sure that Novell E-Directory was going to win in the end, so he didn't bother learning anything about AD before he retired. He got replaced by an extremely diligent admin who automated the shit out of absolutely everything in positively baroque VB script. You think a lot of their stuff still keeps the network running and is critical for the health of the business, but none of it's actually been used in 3 years, but you just don't delete it just to be sure. There was a series of cutbacks in IT, and the whole environment was run for about 4 years by this teenage dipshit whose mum worked in accounts. She said he was good with computers because she couldn't bring herself to admit that he primarily used his computer to do racism. Finally, there's you or someone else here, I don't know. You probably give a shit about security because you're here and you're actually trying. Unfortunately, you're tangled in an unholy fuck nest created by the first three. Nothing's documented properly, so making major changes feels like you're playing pickup sticks with highly explosive spaghetti. You have next to no budget, and whatever you do have set aside for security gets spent on a blinky box made by whichever company took your boss out for the booziest lunch. You see thought leaders on the YouTubes get up in front of huge crowds to fetishize stuff like BeyondCorp and Red Forest, and they sound fucking amazing. But there's no way you're ever going to get to implement any of it. Fixing things takes time and money, and changing things is wildly politically unpopular. Whenever you do try to get through CAB or whatever arcane change management process you have to contend with, you get yelled at because it might briefly inconvenience someone trying to do some real work. You're probably also swamped with industry news that tells you that it's extremely critical that you containerize your blockchain because NSA or some shit. So, instead of sulking and sitting on your hands because you didn't get to do a BeyondCorp or a Red Forest, I'm proposing that you remember the extremely old dad joke, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So let's start talking about stuff you can do. Little stuff that management will let you do because most users won't notice. Stuff that will actually fuck me up if I'm on a pen test and come and try and mess with your systems. So, I used to be a sysadmin, but that was a little while ago, and I've scrubbed a lot of those memories out. So I consulted with a real sysadmin, Jess Dodson, aka @GirlGerms on Twitter, so I could get some relatively recent real-world input on how hard these recommendations would be to implement. And then I had her give a rating out of 5 for each of my recommendations to reflect how much stress and rage and frustration it would take to implement each one. Then, in order to engage with the aesthetic, I hired a stranger on the internet to draw her in those 5 stages of fury. And also, me, the evil pentester, in increasing degrees of misery. So what we're after in each of these slides is the highest possible sort of emotional ratio between the two. Maximum cool Jess, maximum miserable Mike. So, on to the real stuff. The first thing you're going to do to make stuff better is implement Microsoft Laps, or the local admin password solution. Basically, Laps will fully automate the process of setting and rotating unique, strong passwords for the local admin accounts on all your Windows machines. It'll store these passwords as secure attributes in AD, so you can still get to them if you need to, but if they're domain joined, you shouldn't really need to do that often. It's super easy to install and set up. Microsoft have some actually good documentation, which is down there. And Jess gave it a 1 out of 5, and I gave it a 4 out of 5, so right off the bat, we have a nice steep ratio going on. Next thing you're going to do to make me sad is disable the built-in administrator account on all your desktops and servers. If you still need a local admin account, you can create another one and put it in the local administrators group and manage it with Laps. But just disable the built-in one. This is that because a bunch of the ways of remotely executing code on Windows hosts, like SMB, just don't work with local administrators that aren't administrator. It's not going to cripple me entirely, but it'll be a nuisance, and you can do it at the same time you're deploying Laps, and it's not much more effort. I give it only a 2 out of 5, but Jess gave it a 1 out of 5, so it's worth it. Next thing you're going to do is scrub out any credentials that you're inadvertently storing in AD group policy. I've talked about finding bad stuff in group policy at great length before, and that talk is on YouTube, so for all the details you can watch that. But the short version is that up until 2014, Microsoft would let admins configure group policies that stored that configured the local accounts, configured passwords for local accounts on computers in the domain. It was a very popular option because most people using it didn't realize that by default all domain users can view all group policy objects, and while the passwords were stored encrypted, they were all encrypted with the exact same key that you can look up on TechNet. The same goes for passwords configured for scheduled tasks, by the way. So if you want to find all those, you can just run those 2 commands there that'll download a script from GitHub and just run it. It'll just find it. You should probably read them first if you want to, but that'll just do it. You should also probably grep your domain sysvol share for the word password, because the VB script shaman used to really love hard-coding credentials. Jess gives this one a 1, and I give it a 3. Right. It said in the abstract for this talk that I promised not to tell your users to choose better passwords, because you and I know that that just won't work. Instead, what you're going to do is make it impossible for them to set really bad passwords. There's already filters built into AD that does stuff like prevent you from including your username in your password, or those standard criteria that password 1 with a capital P will meet. But it doesn't seem to be super widely known that you can implement your own custom block lists without too much screwing around. Microsoft's documentation on it's really bad, and rolling your own actually requires writing code and compiling it. On the upside, though, this Jeff Tycat created one called Open Password Filter, and it's got good documentation. It's pretty easy to use. You can just drop the DLL in, put in some bad words in a text file, and away you go. This one has the best ratio in the whole presentation. Jess gave it a 1. I give it a straight up 5 because I really like password spraying, and if you do this, it will straight up ruin me. Right. You almost certainly have a mountain of web apps in your environment that you just don't know about. A lot of them will be on some rando appliance or a network camera or a door controller or a life-saving medical device. Because you don't know they exist, most of them will have default credentials, admin password, tomcat. They're everywhere. if you don't find them, I will. And if you did something really annoying with the engagement scope, I'll use the network security camera to take a photo of you while you're picking your nose, and then I'll put it in the report. Oh, it's time for my talk. Shut up. I'm late. If I were looking for this stuff in your environment, I'd use Nmap, and so you should too. Nmap's got like a built-in NSA script for finding these, but this NN poster guy released a fingerprint list for it that's even more thorough than the built-in one. It's really cool. I actually added this after I asked Jess for her list of ratings, but maybe just trust me, I said it's a 2. And for me, it's a 4, because we do love default passwords. Okay, this one's got lots of words. Oh my God. So, you know, and I know that you've got a mountain of service accounts in your AD environment. Most of them will have admin rights on some, if not all, of your servers, and a lot of them have not great passwords. We also both know that just resetting the passwords on all of them to be good is pretty much out of the question. You'll finish eating that elephant one day, but in the meantime, do this thing. An SPN in AD is a service principal name. It's basically a record that says about a given service, which host it's on, what port it's on, what it is, so HTTP or SQL or whatever, and the name of the service account that it's running under. Without going into the ins and outs of AS reps and AS recs and so on, because I don't wanna. If a service account has an SPN associated with it, any low-privilege user can request a service ticket for it, which will allow me to do an offline brute force attack on that service account's password. So what you're going to do to make me sad, because I can't do that, is, or to make the cracking take more or less forever, is you're going to find all the user accounts that have an associated SPN using this snippet of PowerShell that's on the slide, and then you're just going to focus your password resetting efforts on those accounts, because they're the ones that I'll have the ability to do that to. Okay. So, I'm going to assume that you understand that there's this thing called Mimikatz, and if I can own a Windows box that you're logged into, I can steal your passwords with it. A lot of people are in the habit of just like closing the RDP window instead of logging out properly, which of course leaves an active session on the host for me to plunder. You could tell everyone very firmly not to do that, but habits are hard to break. Instead, what you're going to do is set up a group policy so that if someone leaves an idle session for more than a couple of hours, it just logs them off gracefully. No session, no creds for me to steal. This has a nice 2-to-4 ratio. This one is really great for when you have an enormous complex stack of nested groups and users and service accounts and you don't know how to remove users or delete groups without breaking stuff. What you're going to do is take advantage of the fact that in Windows land, deny almost always beats allow. So even if someone has admin rights on a box, you can deny them the ability to log in locally or via RDP or even log in at all from the network. Then you can use that to kind of eliminate a lot of unintended privileged access, both from attackers and from legit users doing dumb stuff. For example, you can deny all service accounts, log on from the network and remote interactive on your entire workstation fleet. And that's just instantly crushed a huge amount of my lateral movement opportunities. You could deny all 3 types for all domain admins on anything that isn't a domain controller, because they shouldn't be using their DA accounts for, you know, stuff that doesn't need it. This one's got a really good ratio, 2-to-5, and it'll cause me an extraordinary amount of pain if you get kind of creative with it. Next, you're going to turn the Windows firewall back on. You're going to do this because you have a big open flat network and solving that problem is actually really hard and expensive and it'll require a bunch of really boring meetings. Whereas Windows Firewall is free. You can enable it with a few changes in group policy and it'll substantially cut down my options for lateral movement and recon. And it has some pretty cool stuff you can do with it beyond the usual allow port X or allow outbound on X and inbound on Y or whatever. I'm not suggesting for a second that you just toggle it on and walk away. That would be a really bad idea, probably a resume generating event. But it'll still require some thought and testing, but Jess only gave it a 2 out of 5 for servers and a 1 out of 5 for desktops. The link at the bottom of the slide is a video of Jess Payne from Microsoft, no relation, from Microsoft explaining how and why you can do this in a lot more detail, and it's well worth a watch. I think it was actually in New Zealand when she did this. Right. You may have heard of NTLM relaying. It's not to be confused with pass the hash. It's a trick where an attacker induces your computer to authenticate as you to an attacker-controlled host, often through some kind of spoofing attack, DNS or multicast DNS or something. The attacker then takes that authentication attempt and relays it to some service that the attacker wants to access, having you authenticate on their behalf. Most likely that second service is going to be SMB, because if you're an admin on that second host, we can use your creds to pop a shell on it. SMB signing is like quick and dirty mutual authentication, and so if the host that we're trying to relay your creds to insists on using it, we're pretty much boned. By default, Windows boxes will support SMB signing, but they don't require it. That won't stop us at all. So you're going to set as many hosts in the network as you can to require it, because that's going to make me real sad. Now for a short list of suggestions that aren't necessarily kind of low-hanging, but they're so high value, I kind of have to mention them anyway. If you have some firewalls and you know that they're like super permissive, just start locking them down. If you can see if you can monitor traffic for a while, look at what ports are being used for comms where, and then just start dropping everything else. Some specific examples, think like your desktop fleet doesn't need to talk to the management interfaces on your switches, so just don't let them. There's probably like a handful of people at most who need to talk to the management stuff on your server fleet, so don't let them. It's easy. So in this case, we have 5 to 15 is the ratio. It's not a magic bullet, but multi-factor authentication is an enormous pain in my ass. Just require it everywhere that management will let you. I think that's like 90 on my side, but yeah, Jess did give it a 5. I'm going to steal a bit from Liam's upcoming talk, and I'm going to use castles as a metaphor for a second. We see this all the time, where an org will have some like super secure network for industrial control or medical data or whatever, and they'll be super proud that they've segregated that network, and the only way to access it is via jump host that requires multi-factor auth, but they always make the same mistake. They put the thing securing the thing outside the perimeter it secures, and probably manage it with the main corporate domain as well. In this picture above, it's kind of like putting a lever that controls the portcullis on your keep in this nice garden here outside, in the outer bailey, instead of like inside the keep. And if you move it, it'll make me really sad. I asked Liam how he felt about me stealing his whole castle bit, and he had this to say. No one would ever design a keep that worked like that. So don't design your network like that. That's the end of the list. I was going to end abruptly here, but then I added some stuff at the last minute. A bunch of you have probably thought this at some point. I can't implement that because half our users need that and that'll break it. So just implement X for the other half. Just because a solution can't be applied to everyone or everything doesn't mean it can't be applied at all. You can't have a strong password policy because like 3/4 of your users log into an ancient mainframe that only allows 8-character passwords. That sucks. So now set a strong password policy for the other quarter, and you've just had a huge win. Yeah, you can make accommodations without letting the requirements of a small group or individual piece of software drag the whole org security down. So, oh, stop it. Sorry, getting croaky. Instead of thinking of fixing this stuff as eating the elephant, maybe think of it as like carving a sculpture out of a piece of raw stone. Sculptors don't just like carve the whole thing using their smallest, finest chisel or press a button and just boof, it's a statue. So start fixing your problems by using rough tools to like just break off the big, easy chunks. And then, you know, break off some medium-sized ones, make the smaller and smaller cuts and refine the details. And then eventually, if you sink enough time into it, you might end up with something that's actually kind of awesome. Thank you very much to these people, Sharo and Metal and Pipes. They provided a fair bit of inspiration. I probably subconsciously plagiarized some shit from them too. I'm very sorry. Special thanks to Jess for lending her likeness and providing an extremely valuable perspective. Pingu says, "Noot noot, be cool, join your union." The end.